This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at WPLN.org/support.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's September 25th, 2025. On this day in 1928, a company was formed that would revolutionize mass media and truly cement the idea that broadcast would become a mainstay form of communication. Now, at the time, the company was called Galvin, after the founder's last name, but now we know it as Motorola. And while it started out making battery eliminators, basically a device to modify a home radio so you could plug it into the wall, within just a couple of years, the firm introduced something utterly new: the car radio. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Home radios, in the form of giant consoles that the family would sit around in the evening, became incredibly popular after World War I, and then car radios exponentially increased the number of people tuning in to hear what was on the airwaves. And businesses were quick to jump into the radio game, putting stations on the air that would offer information and entertainment, along with plenty of mentions of the company that was making that broadcast available. Here in Nashville, the two major insurance companies based here established competing radio stations, both of which are still around. In both cases, even the call letters were advertisement. WSM stood for We Shield Millions, the motto of National Life and Accident. And WLAC is short for Life and Casualty Insurance Company. And yes, that's the LNC of the LNC building, too. What they didn't have at the start was solid regulation. And so as radio really began to take off, people who had spent their money on this fancy, exciting new tech often found themselves frustrated by having trouble finding clear and listenable audio. One station bled into another, creating a mess of crosstalk and interference. It was actually quite similar to problems that emerged for the first kind of radios, the two-way devices used for communications by ships at sea. The government had kind of dragged its feet about getting involved in setting rules for those radios until the sinking of the Titanic. One of the many failures exacerbating the death toll in that disaster was that signals from amateur radio operators made it hard for anyone to hear the ship's distress call. After that, a federal law called the Radio Act of 1912 did establish licensing for radio operators, designated a protected frequency for emergency calls, and other rules meant to prioritize use of the tech in life or death circumstances. But it really only applied specifically to that two-way communication kind of radio. When broadcast entertainment came along in the 20s, and that cacophony of unregulated stations started confusing consumers, President Calvin Coolidge created a panel called the Federal Radio Commission and told them to, quote, try and bring order out of chaos. They really just focused on organizing stations to specific frequencies and setting up a framework that would keep them from interfering with each other. But eventually, in the mid-30s, that evolved into the Federal Communications Commission that is still in existence today and very much in the news right now, since it was comments by the head of the FCC that led to Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air for a short while. And the main task of the FCC was still a logistical one, making sure the public airwaves and other communications channels were maintained in an orderly fashion. And that's still a big part of what the agency does. But the act creating the FCC also inserted, for the first time in this regulation timeline, vague language that set the agency up as a little bit of a content watchdog. There had been talk in Congress about creating a public broadcasting company, maybe a little like the BBC in Britain, or to set aside a quarter of the frequency spectrum for nonprofit or educational services. We would eventually get a smaller portion of the dial, but not yet. What they settled on instead was a requirement that all stations have to tick that public interest programming box in some way, some of the time. As an article written for MTSU's Free Speech Center puts it, stations must make some space on their air for public interest programming and provide a platform for discussion of controversial issues. So what did that mean? Good question. It's honestly pretty nebulous. As broadcasters, all radio and TV stations, including Nashville Public Radio, still have to meet that requirement. Every quarter, we file what's called the Issues Report that documents how we have addressed matters of public interest on our stations. But it's kind of up to the station to figure out what qualifies. I suspect that requirement was part of the impetus for news to become such a standard offering of local TV stations. Public service announcements from nonprofits can count. Those church broadcasts that you might stumble upon in the middle of the night almost surely get thrown into the report as being of what the FCC calls community interest. About a decade ago, when I was running our classical music station, I wanted to figure out if I was really including the right things in the issues reports, so I looked up a lot of other stations' public files to read theirs. And my goodness, the interpretations were all over the map. For what it's worth, Nashville Public Radio's issues reports seem to be among the most detailed in the biz. Our VP Carl Peterson insists that we err on the side of being thorough. But my point is that the rule is wide open to interpretation. Those reports are carefully reviewed every time a station's license comes up for renewal, so you want it to be something the regulators will look at and say, yes, they are meeting all the content requirements. But what they actually want is a little bit of a guessing game. That ambiguity has probably been allowed to stand so that the rules are flexible enough to handle changes in what is considered good public service. But it is confusing. And so are the rules about what you cannot say or do on a broadcast. This is where the Jimmy Kimmel stuff comes into play. Or that thing years ago when Justin Timberlake pulled Janet Jackson's shirt off during a Super Bowl halftime show. Things happen that make at least some people upset, and the FCC has to make a decision about whether a line was crossed. But each time it's a whole new determination of what the line is and where it lies. The comedian George Carlin may have led you to believe that there's a specific list of 7 dirty words that are banned on the airwaves, but even for obscene language, in actuality, regulators must decide each time if an alleged offense fails what they call the 3-pronged test. Is the content salacious or depraved? Does it include an offensive sexual aspect? Does it lack artistic, political, or scientific merit? That's the guideline for curse words, but it's basically how all of these content rules work. Not clear lines, but a framework for regulators to make a new call every time there's an issue. When there is some determination that a national broadcast crossed a line, the lever the FCC has to pull is to discipline the local stations that carried that broadcast, not the network, because networks aren't licensed by the agency. It's the local stations that have that legal obligation to meet those standards, nebulous as they may be. And that is part of why we are now seeing a power struggle between the companies that own local stations and ABC. It's why you couldn't watch Jimmy Kimmel's return broadcast Tuesday night on our local station here in Nashville. WKRN is owned by Nexstar, which is one of the 2 large firms that are pointedly refusing to air his show. Amid all this, it's almost time for the FCC to review its rules for local ownership. This is part of the logistical, technical stuff that the FCC and its predecessors have always regulated. Who can have a station? What frequencies can they use? That type of thing. Unlike the content rules, these regulations are very specific and quite complex. They are due for review every 4 years. It's a really long process. The final documents from the 2022 review were just entered into the public record at the start of this month. The next review cycle is supposed to begin in the new year. In just a few minutes, demystifying childhood vaccine recommendations. That's coming up after the newscast.
The justice system is complicated. I'm Paige Flager, and as WPLN's criminal justice reporter, I'm constantly asking, is the system working? And who is it working for?
The system is broken. I think it's more punitive than anything.
And this is not about justice anymore. This is about vengeance.
We're trying to get justice from a justice system that failed us.
How policies impact real people. Hear their stories here on WPLN News.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. A group of people wearing Make America Great Again hats and holding signs with provocative messages were removed from Tennessee State University Tuesday afternoon. The individuals called their group Fearless Debates and appeared on the TSU campus with signs that read, DEI should be illegal and deport all illegals now. The incident was posted on Facebook by the Nashville chapter of the NAACP. A post on TSU's Facebook page read that the MAGA supporters were not affiliated with the university and not authorized to be there. The members were escorted off campus without incident. The group posted on social media videos showing TSU students shouting and removing the signs. The university says an investigation is underway and plans to meet with students to discuss the incident. The The Nashville NAACP urged black leaders and other historically black colleges and universities to prepare for more clashes. A proposal to rename a Sumner County street in memory of conservative activist Charlie Kirk is prompting intense pushback. The principal of Liberty Creek High School wrote to county commissioners to express his opposition, and that letter has spread quickly, leading to a flood of messages, particularly from parents at the school, asking commissioners to ditch the idea. One parent against the name change is Tara Pierges, whose son attends Liberty Creek Middle School. She believes that Kirk is a polarizing figure and that politics should be kept out of school.
Charlie Kirk, being a very online personality, has made some racist comments, specifically, referring to Black people and Black women and their intelligence. And I think that it would be, inappropriate in our school system to include renaming our beloved Wolfpack Way with a controversial figure like that.
The proposal calls for changing Wolfpack Way to Charlie Kirk Way. It's the street that connects the Liberty Creek schools. Principal Philip Holt suggests choosing a different roadway because of the attachment the community has to the Wolfpack name, mascot, and ideals. Residents, including some self-described supporters of Kirk, also say that a different road at a different time would be more appropriate. Elsewhere, in West Tennessee, a man has been arrested for a social media post related to Charlie Kirk's murder. The Tennessean reports Larry Bushard is a former police officer with the Huntington Police Department. He's charged with threats of mass violence on school property. That's based on a photo he posted to a Facebook page for Perry County residents on a thread discussing a vigil for Kirk. It included a picture of President Donald Trump and a comment the president made after a school shooting in Perry County, Iowa, which said, quote, "We have to get over it." That was paired with the caption, "This seems relevant today." Investigators contend the image was intended to make people worry about a possible shooting at the local high school in Perry County, Tennessee. Bushart was taken into custody on Monday and booked into the county jail. The Tennessee Attorney General's office is investigating a large consulting firm that manages TennCare's eligibility system. The AG's office says it's looking for signs of unlawful discrimination in its hiring. The issue centers around potential DEI practices. Diversity hiring has come under scrutiny after a 2023 Supreme Court ruling prohibited race-based affirmative action programs at colleges. Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti wants to know whether Deloitte set goals for hiring employees of certain races or genders, and if it did, whether the company engaged in unlawful discrimination. Deloitte already announced in February that it was ending its DEI diversity goals. A Kentucky company says a new Tennessee law regulating hemp discriminates against out-of-state businesses. From member station WKYU, Lisa Autry has more on a new lawsuit.
The new law requires wholesalers and retailers of hemp products to have a physical location in Tennessee and prohibits suppliers from shipping directly to consumers. Louisville-based Cornbread Hemp has filed a federal lawsuit alleging Tennessee is violating the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Chris Barneywalt is an attorney with Pacific Legal Foundation, which is representing Cornbread Hemp.
What the three-tier system does is it forces out-of-state businesses to funnel their businesses through in-state middlemen rather than going directly to the consumer.
Cornbread Hemp says it made almost $1 million selling products to some 11,000 Tennesseans in the past year. Tennessee's new regulations are set to take effect in January. That's when oversight of the hemp industry will be transferred from the State Agriculture Department to the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. I'm Lisa Autry in Bowling Green.
As Oracle plans its new global headquarters in Nashville, its reach in the tech world and beyond is expanding. The White House is wrapping up a deal to put Oracle in charge of TikTok's algorithm and data security in the United States. The tech giant has also signed contracts to build data centers for major artificial intelligence firms like OpenAI, Meta, and NVIDIA. The Tennessean reports the company is also getting in on one of Nashville's other big industries, healthcare. Ascension St. Thomas plans to use Oracle Health Services, an AI-integrated system to keep track of patient data and offer insights. And Oracle is partnering with Meharry Medical College to create an innovation hub on the East Bank. Oracle has yet to start construction on its 70-acre campus there due to a zoning issue. The Metro Council could weigh in on the zoning change as soon as next month. Oracle has said it plans to open the headquarters by 2030. A Japanese medical device company is moving its engineering operations to Nashville. Nisha Medical Technologies announced yesterday it would be partnering with Vanderbilt to work on tools that allow doctors to better examine organs. WPLN's Cynthia Abrams reports the state was resolved to make sure the company chose Tennessee.
Nisha promises that the move will bring 38 new jobs and a $4.5 million investment to Nashville. The partnership hopes to advance endoscopic devices, which doctors use during colonoscopies and for diagnosing things like cancer, ulcers, and other internal issues. It's an investment the state really wanted.
Well, we were hearing from the company that they were thinking about other states. And I was like, there's absolutely zero chance that's going to happen.
That's Stuart McWhorter, Tennessee's Economic and Community Development Commissioner. McWhorter said the state got creative in the incentives they offered to Nisha.
We did some things that we normally don't do out of our department with our fast track grants, and we made it work.
Tennessee's fast track grants are state dollars that go to companies to help them offset costs of moving operations to the state. They're often based on the number of new jobs they create. That's why, McWhorter said, the state tapped into another fund to make sure the grant was desirable to Nisha. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
A prominent member of the Nashville mayor's office is stepping down. Former Metro Council member Bob Mendez has served as the city's chief development officer since Mayor Freddie O'Connell took office in 2023. Now, the Nashville Banner reports Mendez will leave his role at the end of October. Mendez, who was one of the loudest opponents of the new Tennessee Titans Stadium, has for the past 2 years overseen the development of Nashville's East Bank, which is the land surrounding the stadium. He also shepherded a new contract for Ascend Amphitheater and an agreement to revitalize Rivergate Mall. Last week, Mendez caught flack from Tennessee House Speaker Cameron Sexton, who criticized Metro's work on the East Bank, particularly about lagging negotiations with Oracle and TPAC. In a statement provided to WPLN, Mendez, an attorney by trade, says he will be returning full-time to the private sector. The mayor expressed his gratitude to Mendez for, quote, setting a strong foundation for this administration on some of our most important work. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
From WPLN News in Nashville, I'm LaTonya Turner. Are you confused about what's happening with children's vaccines? A lot of people are, including doctors. Federal health officials are considering changes to long-accepted evidence-based vaccine policies. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney is here to share what Tennessee parents should know. So this issue really revved up last week as the federal health officials were meeting, and it seemed a bit erratic. What ultimately happened?
Yeah, so for some background, there's this group. It's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And for decades before the pandemic, this was like a really kind of boring group. They picked what strains of the flu would be in the annual flu shot, or if they made changes or recommendations, they spent years reviewing data. And then in COVID, they were obviously making recommendations about COVID shots, which really raised their profile. And then this year, when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. took over as Health and Human Services Secretary, that group became a major source of drama. He fired all 17 members and started appointing people who have a history of anti-vaccine activism. Well, last week, it came out they wanted to make several changes to vaccine recommendations with a few days' notice.
They're an advisory group, right? Why do their recommendations even matter?
So private insurance companies pay for whatever shots the ACIP says they should, and it follows their vaccine schedule. Those who are enrolled in programs like TennCare or who are uninsured can get their shots paid for through this program. It's federally funded, and it's called Vaccines for Children. They also follow those recommendations very closely. So people technically can get shots that aren't recommended or get them in a different time frame from the recommendations. But it's expensive, it's harder, and really not accessible to people with low incomes. They had pitched changing several vaccine recommendations, and some of the pitches were less surprising because they involved vaccines that have been politicized, like mRNA COVID vaccines and the one that protects against measles, mumps, and rubella. Pretty common battlegrounds for anti-vaccine advocates. But the one that really caught the medical community off guard was the hepatitis B vaccine. I talked with a pediatrician in Chattanooga, Dr. John Heiss. He said parents have voiced fear to him about the MMR vaccine, for example, but with hepatitis B, not really.
Their concern is, do they need to get it done now because they feel they're not a high risk as an infant? It's just more the idea of any vaccines.
So, Catherine, what is the level of risk for infants?
So they can catch this bloodborne virus during delivery. And in grown-ups, it's rare for hepatitis to become this lifelong chronic disease that can cause all these different kinds of cancer. But in babies, 90% will have that turn into the chronic version. There's no legal requirement to test pregnant people. The ones who do get tested tend to get the test really early in the pregnancy. Prenatal care is not exactly easy to get. We rank pretty poorly for maternal care. So problems like this are why the recommendation is to give that shot within 24 hours of birth. Tennessee actually ranks 4th in the nation for the amount of adults who do have hepatitis B. So it's pretty common here.
And that committee, as we said, has been pretty erratic in its discussion. So what is the Federal Advisory Committee recommending?
They did say they want to revisit it, and they might make changes, but we're not sure what they're going to be.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That's WPLN's health reporter, Catherine Sweeney, with an update on how federal vaccine policy can affect Tennessee kids.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.